In the quiet town where I lived, an unsettling silence loomed over my house. It was a silence so profound it seemed to swallow every sound, leaving an eerie stillness that clung to the air like a shroud. It was a small town, where everyone knew everyone, and my house was just like any other. But something had changed. You see, it all started when we brought in this antique mirror from a clearance sale. There was nothing particularly striking about it. It was a simple piece, with a wooden frame aged by time. We thought it would add a touch of rustic charm to our home. But ever since that mirror came into our lives, the house just hasn't been the same. It's as if the walls have grown colder. Even on the sunniest days, the house feels shrouded in shadows. And the mirror, it seems to be at the center of it all. It's hard to explain, but it's like it quote s, like the mirror is watching. You know that prickling sensation you get at the back of your neck when you feel someone's gaze on you? That's the feeling I get whenever I'm around that mirror. It's a chilling sensation, one that sends a shiver down your spine, making the hairs on your arms stand on end. And there's something else too, a shadow. I've seen it, reflected in the mirror when there's no one else in the house. A shadow that seems to have a life of its own. It's not something I can easily dismiss as a trick of the light or a figment of my imagination. It's there, as real as anything else, yet unexplainable. I've tried to ignore it, to convince myself that it's all in my head. But I can't shake off the eerie feeling that something is off about the mirror, that the silence of my house is not just a silence, that there's something lurking in that silence, waiting, watching. And that's when it happened. The mirror got broked. One evening, I noticed something that sent a chill down my spine. It was a typical night, just me, the silence of my home, and the flickering light from the TV. But as I passed by the mirror in the hallway, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something. A figure, a shape, a shadow. At first, I convinced myself it was just a trick of the light, the way the dim glow of the TV danced across the glass. But the more I looked, the more I saw. A figure, tall and slender, standing behind me, its form mimicking mine. I was alone in the house, yet there it was, a strange shadow in the mirror, a reflection that shouldn't be there. My heart pounded in my chest, every instinct screamed at me to run, to get out. But curiosity, a sense of incredulity, rooted me to the spot. I moved and the figure moved. I raised an arm, and it followed suit. It was like a dance, a macabre mimicry that sent shivers down my spine. I tried to reason with myself, tried to convince myself that it was just a trick of the light, a figment of my imagination. Yet the figure was still there, still mimicking my every move. I was alone in the house, but I wasn't alone. I could feel it, a sense of unease, a presence, and otherness that was both familiar and alien. I decided to investigate further, to confront this strange apparition. As I approached the mirror, the figure seemed to grow, its shadowy form becoming more defined, more real. My heart pounded in my chest, my hands shook, but I pressed on. The closer I got, the more the figure seemed to react, its movements becoming more frantic, more desperate. The shadowy figure in the mirror was following my every move, yet there was no one else in the room. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I was alone, yet I wasn't alone. And as I stood there, frozen in fear, I knew this was just the beginning. I decided to dig deeper, to find out more about the mirror's past. I had a gnawing feeling that something was off, and I couldn't just ignore it. I started my search, pouring through old records, tracing back the origin of the mirror. As I delved further into the mirror's past, I stumbled upon a curious fact. The mirror belonged to a man who lived alone, known in his town for his eccentric behavior. He was a recluse, seldom seen outside his home. People whispered about his odd habits, his solitary life, and his peculiar obsession with mirrors. The more I learned, the more intrigued I became. The man had abruptly disappeared one day, leaving no trace behind. His property was sold off, and the mirror found its way into my home. The circumstances of his disappearance were shrouded in mystery, and no one knew what had happened to him. The unsettling stories began to weave a chilling narrative in my mind. As I pieced together the story, I felt a sense of dread creeping over me. The mirror, the man's disappearance, the shadow, were they all connected? Was it possible that the mirror had played a part in the man's vanishing? I couldn't shake off the feeling of unease that gripped me. The stark reality of my research was deeply disconcerting. I was living with a mirror that had a disquieting history, a mirror that once belonged to a man who had vanished without a trace. A man who had lived alone, just like me. Each piece of information I uncovered added a new layer of fear and apprehension. The shadow in the mirror was no longer just a random occurrence. It was a chilling reminder of the mirror's past, a reflection of a life that once was. The mirror's previous owner had disappeared without a trace, and I was beginning to fear the worst. Was I next in line? This disquieting discovery left me questioning everything. The mirror had become an unsettling presence in my home, a silent observer with a dark history. I was about to uncover a shocking revelation that would leave me speechless. The time had come for me to face the shadow in the mirror. I steeled myself, squared my shoulders, and stared into the glass. As I did, the figure sharpened, details emerging from the darkness until I could see a face. It was a face from the past, the previous owner of the mirror. Fear gripped me, a chill running down my spine. Suddenly, in my terror, I stumbled, knocking the mirror off its stand. The sound of shattering glass echoed through the empty house. I stood there, staring at the broken shards scattered across the floor, my heart pounding in my chest. As the mirror shattered, I realized that the haunting figure was the mirror's previous owner, trapped in his own reflection. Now, with the mirror broken, I can only wonder, where did he go? Have you ever felt a chilling presence even when you're alone? Picture this. You're going about your day, the same as any other. The sun's shining, the birds are singing, and life is as ordinary as it gets. But then, something shifts. It's subtle at first. You feel a strange prickle at the back of your neck, like the cold breath of a ghost. You shake it off, telling yourself it's just your imagination playing tricks on you. But the feeling doesn't go away. Instead, it intensifies. It's as if there's an unseen force around you, a presence that doesn't belong. It's like a shadow has fallen over your day, turning the sunshine into an eerie twilight. Then, the odd occurrences begin. They start small. You hear a strange noise like the soft whisper of a voice. It's barely audible, yet it cuts through the day's chatter like a knife. You look around, but there's no one there. Next, objects begin to move on their own. A book falls off a shelf, a chair shifts slightly out of place, a door swings open with no one to push it. It's as if the world around you has come to life, animated by some invisible puppeteer. And then, the temperature drops. Not a gentle, gradual descent, but a sudden plunge. The room grows cold, so cold that you can see your breath. It's as if you've stepped into a freezer, even though you're standing in your own living room. You don't know what's happening, but you know it's not normal. You feel a growing sense of unease, a prickling fear that creeps up your spine. You try to ignore it, to go about your day as if everything is fine, but you can't shake the feeling that something is very, very wrong. You're about to reach for the phone, to call someone, anyone, to tell them what's going on. But just as you lift your hand, the lights flicker, and then, as if on cue, the power went out. In the pitch darkness, I felt a cold gust of wind sweep across the room. An uninvited chill settled in, pricking at my skin and teasing the hairs on the back of my neck. It was a sensation I couldn't shake off, a feeling of looming dread that wrapped around me like a shroud. As the silence grew louder, a sense of fear began to prickle at the edges of my mind. The shadows seemed to grow longer, the silence deeper, the air colder. But the darkness was not silent. It was filled with whispers, faint voices that seemed to echo from nowhere and everywhere at once. Feeling a surge of courage, I grabbed my flashlight and began to explore the strange occurrences in my home. The whispers grew louder. The objects around me started to move on their own, as if guided by an unseen force. The air seemed to vibrate with a sinister energy, the whispers growing louder, forming words I couldn't quite understand. I decided to investigate, to uncover the source of this unseen force. With every step, the whispers grew louder, the cold gusts of wind stronger. As I moved deeper into my house, I discovered a hidden door, cleverly concealed within the wall. Pushing it open, I stepped into a hidden room, untouched by time. The room was filled with an eerie stillness, a silence that seemed to echo with centuries of secrets. The air was heavy, the room filled with a sense of foreboding. My flashlight flickered over the room, revealing a sight that made my blood run cold. There, in the middle of the room, was an object that seemed out of place. It was an old dusty book, its pages yellowed and brittle with age. It was bound in leather, its cover embossed with symbols that I didn't recognize. As I picked it up, the whispers fell silent, the unseen force retreating. The book seemed to pulsate with a life of its own, an energy that seemed to seep into my bones. I felt a chill run down my spine, a sense of dread filling me. Inside that room, I found something that sent chills down my spine. There in the middle of that hidden room was an old, dust-covered mirror. A chill ran down my spine as I moved closer, the air thick with an eerie silence that seemed to whisper 1,000 untold tales. The mirror, covered in a thick layer of dust and cobwebs, seemed as ancient and forgotten as the room itself. As I wiped away the years of neglect, its chilling reflection came into view. It wasn't my own reflection that stared back at me, but a haunting presence that seemed trapped within its glass confines. My heart pounded in my chest, my breath hitching as I realized the truth. This mirror was the epicenter of all the paranormal activities I'd been experiencing. An entity, a spectral figure, was trapped inside this mirror, a prisoner of its own reflection. Its ethereal presence seemed to vibrate against the glass, a silent plea for help resonating in the silence. The mirror wasn't just a mirror, it was a cage, a prison for this lost soul. As I stood there, frozen in fear and disbelief, the entity began to communicate. It told me a tale of sorrow and despair, a story that sent shivers down my spine. It spoke of a time when it was alive, of a life cut short by tragedy, and of an eternity spent imprisoned within the mirror. It was a tale that was as terrifying as it was tragic. The entity was not malevolent, but a victim, a captive of its own tragic past. It was not the source of my fear, but rather a fellow sufferer, a companion in the darkness. Its haunting eyes pleaded for release, a plea that resonated with my own terror and sympathy. The terrifying truth was not that the mirror was haunted, but that an innocent soul was trapped within it, yearning for release. The realization was as chilling as the entity's story, a grim reminder of the darkness that lurks in the corners of our world. It pleaded for release, and I, in my fear and sympathy, decided to help. The decision was made, the path chosen. What followed next was a journey into the unknown, a terrifying venture into the shadows of the paranormal. I should have known better, but fear and sympathy clouded my judgment. The entity that I had come to see as a victim, a captive of some cruel circumstance, was nothing but a master of deceit. Its whispers of pain, its cries for freedom were all but a ruse, a well-crafted plot to lure me into its trap. I had thought myself a liberator, a rescuer, but in the end, I was nothing more than a pawn in its wicked game. The moment the entity was released, it reveled in its newfound freedom, its form twisting and contorting with glee. It was not the helpless spirit it had portrayed itself to be. No, it was a malevolent force, now free to spread its terrifying power across our realm. Its laughter echoed around me, a sound filled with pure malicious delight. As the entity laughed and vanished, I was left with the chilling realization that I had unleashed a horror upon the world. Imagine, my friend and I, two grown adults deciding to spend our day at Disneyland, a place synonymous with laughter, joy, and childhood memories. The air was thick with excitement as we walked through the gates, our hearts pounding with the anticipation of revisiting the magic that once captivated our youthful imaginations. We immersed ourselves in a whirlwind of attractions, from the heart-stopping thrill of roller coasters to the enchanting performances that unfolded on stage. As the day wore on, we could feel a subtle shift in the atmosphere. The sky transformed from a bright blue canvas to a darker shade, streaked with hues of orange and pink. The cheerful chatter of the crowd softened into a low hum, and the park lights flickered on, casting long shadows that danced and twisted around us. As the sun dipped below the horizon, we realized we had lost track of time. The once vibrant park now took on a more sinister ambiance. In the dim light, my eyes caught sight of a figure. It was Mickey Mouse, the park's beloved mascot, following us. What a charming sight, we thought initially, a playful end to an enchanting day. But soon, amusement turned into an uncanny feeling of unease. Mickey seemed to be everywhere we went. There was a relentless persistence about him, a doggedness that was off-putting. As the night deepened, the park started to empty out. Laughter and chatters faded into the distance, replaced by an eerie silence. We were alone, save for the silhouette of Mickey, always lurking in the shadows. There was something unnatural about the way he moved, the way he followed. It wasn't the jovial, comical Mickey we knew from the cartoons, but a sinister shadow that seemed imbued with a dark intent. The most unsettling part was his silence. He didn't utter a word, not a greeting, not a giggle, just the sound of his heavy footsteps echoing in the quiet night. It was as if the very air around him was heavy with dread, a palpable sense of fear that seemed to grip us. That's when I noticed it. A dark, viscous liquid dripping from Mickey's mouth. It was blood. A chill ran down my spine as I stared at the grotesque sight, the once cheerful mascot now a horrifying specter in the moonlight. Our day at the happiest place on earth had turned into our worst nightmare. A chill ran down my spine and my heart pounded in my chest. We were being hunted. In the eerie stillness of the Disneyland park, the only sounds were our frantic breaths and the thumping of our hearts. Once a place of joy and laughter, the park now felt like an ominous, labyrinthine nightmare. The shadows seemed to swallow the familiar landmarks, making each turn a gamble. The twinkling lights of the park, once warm and inviting, now cast long, terrifying shadows that danced with our every move. Our attempts to escape felt futile, like a mouse being toyed with by a cat. The once charming paths twisted into a maze of dread, each turn more chilling than the last. The silence was broken only by the rustling of leaves and the creaking of the rides, their cheerful facades now a cruel mockery of our terror. Behind us, the bloodied mascot, once a symbol of childlike innocence, relentlessly pursued. Its footfalls echoed on the pavement, a chilling rhythm that matched our racing hearts. It was a monstrous perversion of childhood nostalgia, a grotesque image that seemed to thrive in the shadows of the park. The once friendly figure of Mickey Mouse, now a specter of fear, was relentless. Its pursuit was tireless, its intent horrifyingly clear. The sight of the once beloved character, its face smeared with crimson, was a chilling testament to the perversion of innocence. Our desperate flight took us past the cheerful facades of rides and attractions. Each one, usually filled with laughter and joy, now stood silent and deserted. The vibrant colors and whimsical themes seemed to mock our terror, their cheerfulness a sharp contrast to our dread. Every corner we turned, every ride we ran past, the mascot was there, never faltering, never slowing. The once jovial figure now seemed a relentless predator, its pursuit a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk even in the happiest of places. Every step echoed with the horrifying realization: we were being hunted in the happiest place on earth. Every corner we turned, every ride we ran past, the mascot was there, never faltering, never slowing. We finally found a place to hide, catching our breaths and trying to calm our racing hearts. The lights of Disneyland had long since dimmed, swallowed by the inky blackness of the night. Our laughter and excitement from earlier had morphed into a thick, palpable fear hanging heavy in the air. We were trapped in what was supposed to be the happiest place on earth, yet now felt like a haunting maze of horror. As we huddled together in the darkness, our breaths were shallow, punctuating the silence. The eerie stillness was broken only by the distant, distorted sounds of cheerful music, now seeming like a chilling symphony of terror. We held on to each other, praying that the bloodied Mickey Mouse who had been tailing us had finally lost our scent. Time seemed to stretch into an endless abyss, our hearts pounding against the deafening silence. The absence of the sinister mascot felt like a small victory, a momentary relief in an ocean of dread. But the fear clung to us, a relentless predator refusing to let go. In the dim light, my eyes started adjusting, scanning our hideout. It was then I noticed a shape, a familiar silhouette that made my stomach churn. My heart pounded in my chest as I reached out, my hand trembling as it touched the cold, synthetic material. A Mickey Mouse costume, nestled innocuously in my friend's bag. My mind raced, trying to piece together the horrifying puzzle. The costume, the relentless pursuit, the blood, it all started to form a chilling picture. The realization hit me like a cold wave, sending a shiver down my spine. My friend, my confidant, was the bloodied Mickey Mouse. He was not following us, he was leading us, leading me. But to where, and why? The questions swirled in my mind, each more terrifying than the last. A wave of betrayal washed over me, replacing the fear with a cold, harsh reality. We were not victims of a sinister mascot gone rogue. No, the horror was much closer, much more personal. It was my friend, my companion, the person I trusted. Tears welled up in my eyes, blurring my vision. The happiest place on earth had become my personal nightmare, a twisted tale of friendship and deception. The sinister Mickey Mouse was not the monster. The monster was the person standing next to me. My heart stopped. The bloodied Mickey Mouse was not following us. He was leading us away, away from the real horror, my friend.